Imagine for a second healing a paralyzed man in public, right? And instead of this triggering like massive cheers from the crowd, it instantly sparks a bipartisan assassination plot against you.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly dramatic.
It really is. Today we are looking at the exact moment Jesus' early ministry turns legitimately deadly. But before we jump into the text, I want to take a quick moment to look right at you, the listener. And I just want to offer a sincere divine blessing for your day and for your entire week ahead. May you find, clarity, peace, and purpose in whatever challenges you are facing right now.
That is, that's just a wonderful place to start, especially considering the really intense territory we are covering today.
For sure. So we are taking a deep dive into the 3rd chapter of the Gospel of Mark. And we've got our stacks of notes here, drawing heavily from the historical context of the Holman and NAA Study Bibles.
That's a great context of those.
Oh, absolutely. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a massive turning point. I mean, this is the chapter where the crowds just scale up exponentially.
Yeah, they really do.
And the religious elite, they decide that simply opposing Jesus isn't enough anymore. Plus, the centuries-old concept of what it actually means to be family gets totally dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up.
Right, and to understand just how quickly things escalate here, we kind of have to drop right into the tension of a local synagogue in Capernaum.
Set the scene for us.
So the atmosphere is already, it's volatile. Jesus walks in, and there is a man present with a withered or paralyzed hand. But the focus of the scene actually isn't really on the man who needs healing.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's on the Pharisees. The study notes highlight that they are observing Jesus, and the Greek text uses this very specific legal term for the observation.
Oh, so they aren't just casually watching.
Exactly. They are scrutinizing him to build a formal capital accusation.
Which, to a modern listener, you listening to this right now, that sounds completely absurd. Why would restoring someone's paralyzed hand be grounds for a legal, death penalty accusation?
Right? It makes zero sense until you realize it is the Sabbath. And to grasp the weight of this, we have to look at what the Sabbath represented to a first-century Jew who is, living under Roman occupation.
It was a big deal.
It was huge. It wasn't just some technical rule about taking a day off work. It was their primary cultural identity marker. Like when the Romans were demanding taxes and total allegiance, observing the Sabbath was a way for the Jewish people to physically demonstrate that they answered to a higher king.
So it was like an act of cultural survival.
Yes, exactly.
So from the Pharisees' perspective, strictly enforcing the Sabbath isn't just about being annoying or pedantic rule followers.
No, not at all.
It's about protecting their national identity from just being assimilated and totally erased by the Roman Empire. So any violation of it looks like a literal threat to their existence.
Precisely. And their oral tradition had evolved over time to dictate that you could only provide medical treatment on the Sabbath if it was an active life or death emergency.
Okay, I see.
And a paralyzed hand is, it's a chronic condition, right? It's not fatal. So to heal it right then and there constituted unlawful work.
Wow. So they're essentially using this disabled man as human bait.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just to see if Jesus will break their most sacred cultural boundary. And Jesus clearly sees the trap, but he doesn't quietly pull the man aside into a back room or anything.
No, he does the exact opposite.
Right. He calls him forward into the center of the room in front of everyone and asks the Pharisees this brilliant, trapping question of his own. He says, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?
And they refused to answer. The silence in that room would have been absolutely deafening.
You could probably hear a pin drop.
Totally. And Mark's gospel gives us this remarkably rare glimpse into Jesus' psychological state in that exact moment.
What does it say?
Well, he looks around at them with indignation. And the Greek word used there is orgish, which implies a profound, righteous anger. But that anger is simultaneously coupled with a really deep grief over the hardness of their hearts.
That is so intense. So he's furious that their rigid system of rule-keeping has entirely blinded them to actual human suffering.
Right.
But he's also just grieving the spiritual deadness that causes them to act that way.
Right.
So he tells the man to stretch out his hand, and boom, it is completely restored. But the fallout from this miracle is what sets the entire rest of the chapter in motion.
Yeah, because the Pharisees don't just walk away frustrated or annoyed. The text states they immediately leave the synagogue and begin conspiring with the Herodians to destroy him.
And for anyone who is unfamiliar with first-century Judean politics, we really have to unpack how shocking that alliance is. because the Pharisees and the Herodians absolutely despised each other.
They were total opposites.
Right. The Pharisees were religious purists. They vehemently opposed the Roman occupation and all the Hellenistic culture it brought in.
And the Herodians were, like you said, the exact opposite. They were a political faction whose wealth and power depended entirely on supporting King Herod and the Roman Hellenistic system.
So they represented literally everything the Pharisees were trying to protect the nation against.
Exactly.
I was thinking about this, and it's basically the equivalent of like a fierce anti-government militia suddenly shaking hands with the federal agencies they protest against.
That is a great analogy.
Right. And solely because a new third party has emerged who threatens them both. The fact that the Pharisees are willing to compromise their strict purity to ally with Roman sympathizers just shows how terrified they are of Jesus' influence.
It really does. This unholy alliance is a massive tactical shift. The religious establishment isn't just annoyed anymore. They are actively plotting an assassination.
Right.
And because of this localized death threat, Jesus is forced into a strategic pivot. He withdraws from the confined, highly regulated space of the synagogue and heads out to the open shores of the Sea of Galilee.
But this withdrawal creates a massive geographic and logistical bottleneck. Because, if the Pharisees thought pushing it out of their local synagogue would isolate him, it does the exact opposite.
Oh yeah, the crowds don't just follow him, they absolutely explode in size.
That's wild.
The study Bibles map out the geography here, and it is staggering for a grassroots movement in the ancient world. People are traveling from Judea and Jerusalem in the south.
Walking miles and miles.
Right. And they are coming from Idumea, which is an Edomite region even further south. They are crossing the Jordan River from the east.
So it's a full-on regional migration at this point. And they aren't even all Jewish, right?
No, not at all. They are pouring in from Tyre and Sidon, which are Gentile territories up to the north. His fame has completely bypassed the regional and cultural boundaries of the time.
Which sounds great, but it's actually dangerous.
Yeah, the sheer volume of humanity becomes a physical hazard. Jesus actually has to instruct his disciples to keep a small boat ready on the shore, simply so he isn't crushed by the masses pressing in to touch him for healing.
Just imagine that visual.
Mm-hmm.
And amidst all this visceral chaos, people with terrible diseases throwing themselves at him. There's this very bizarre spiritual dynamic happening, too.
The unclean spirits.
Yeah. The text notes that whenever the unclean spirits, the demons, saw him, they would fall down and scream, "You are the Son of God." And Jesus strictly orders them to stay quiet.
Right. Theologians often refer to this as the Messianic secret.
But wait, I got to push back on this a little bit. If you are launching a public movement, right, and supernatural entities are loudly validating your exact identity to thousands of potential followers, why silence the free marketing?
I know, it sounds counterintuitive.
Right. Let them be the billboard. Even if they are demonic, they are technically telling the factual truth about who he is.
That is a very natural modern assumption. But we have to look at how they're telling the truth, and more importantly, what the crowd would actually do with that information.
What do you mean?
Well, the study notes clarify that the demons aren't submitting to him. They are trying to seize control of the narrative. First-century crowds were incredibly desperate for a militant, conquering Messiah who would violently overthrow Rome.
Ah, I see. So if the demons broadcast his identity as the Son of God out loud, the crowd instantly maps their own political expectations onto him.
Exactly. They'll try to make him a military commander.
And they'd completely miss that his actual mission involves, suffering, teaching, and spiritual repentance.
Right. Jesus refuses to let demonic forces act as his PR agents because their endorsement would completely distort his entire purpose.
That makes a lot of sense.
He wants to reveal his identity on his own timeline, through his teachings and his eventual sacrifice, not through the panic-inducing screams of unclean spirits.
Right. The medium is the message. But honestly, managing this level of chaos, the crushing crowds, the assassination plots, the spiritual warfare, it's just completely unsustainable for one person.
Oh, absolutely.
To survive and expand, he needs infrastructure. He needs proxies.
He has to scale the ministry, which means he has to delegate. So Jesus retreats from the chaos of the shoreline, goes up a mountain, and summons a specific group of men to himself.
The 12.
Yeah. From the larger group of followers, he appoints 12, designating them as apostles, which literally means envoys or sent ones.
And the number 12 is heavy with symbolism, right? He's not just picking a convenient staff size for a startup. He is intentionally echoing the 12 tribes of Israel.
Precisely. He is telegraphing the creation of a new, restored Israel-like, a new Messianic community. And he gives this cabinet 3 distinct mandates.
What are they?
First, to simply be with him, to learn from him directly. Second, to be sent out to preach. And third, to carry his authority to cast out demons. He is effectively replicating his own ministry through them.
Which is brilliant strategy. But when you look at who actually makes the cut for this foundational team, it is an absolute HR nightmare.
Oh, it really is.
These are not polished, unified, corporate professionals.
No, the text gives us some glaring clues about their temperaments. Like, he names the brothers, James and John, Boanerges, which means sons of thunder.
And let's be real, you don't get nicknamed a son of thunder for being mild-mannered and super diplomatic.
Definitely not.
It implies explosive, volatile personalities. But the real powder keg, the part that blows my mind, is when you look at the political dynamics of this roster. You are putting Simon the Zealot right next to Matthew the tax collector.
Which is such a brilliant point to highlight. The Zealots were fierce nationalists. They fully believed the only faithful response to Roman occupation was armed, violent rebellion.
Yeah, and a tax collector in first century Judea wasn't just some boring bureaucrat in a suit. They worked for the Romans.
Right, they were collaborators.
Exactly. They paid the empire up front for the right to collect taxes, and then they made their profit by ruthlessly extorting their own Jewish neighbors.
It was a brutal system.
So you have Simon, a man whose entire ideology is based on literally killing Roman collaborators, sitting at a campfire with Matthew, an actual Roman collaborator who gets rich off the oppression of his own people.
It's pretty wild. It's as if a modern startup purposely hired an extreme anti-government anarchist and an IRS agent to work on a tiny 5-person team.
Yes.
On paper, they should have murdered each other, but their inclusion really demonstrates the unifying power of Jesus' leadership. They aren't united by shared politics or backgrounds at all.
Right.
They're united entirely by their calling to follow him.
That's powerful. But, while Jesus is successfully building this radically diverse new family up on the mountain, his actual biological family is coming to the conclusion that he has completely lost his mind.
Yeah, the narrative transitions back into this very intense claustrophobic setting. Jesus enters a house, likely back in Capernaum, and the crowds pack in so tightly again that he and his newly appointed disciples cannot even eat.
He can't even get a meal in.
No, and here Jesus faces a coordinated dual attack on his character.
So his family hears about this endless mob and the mounting danger from the Pharisees, but they don't show up to support him. The text says they set out to seize him because they believe he is out of his mind.
Right.
They basically think he is experiencing a public manic breakdown and needs to be forcibly removed for his own good.
That is the physical, familial attack. But simultaneously, there is a massive spiritual and theological attack coming from the religious elites. An official delegation of scribes travels all the way down from Jerusalem.
So these aren't the local guys anymore.
No, these are the heavy hitters of the religious establishment.
And they can't deny the miracles because literally thousands of people are witnessing them every day. So they have to change the narrative. If they can't deny the power, they have to attack the source of the power.
Right. They accuse him of being possessed by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons. They publicly claim that Jesus is using Satan's own power to cast out Satan.
Which is quite the accusation. But instead of just getting super defensive, Jesus absolutely dismantles their accusation using pure logic. He speaks in parables, asking them, how can Satan cast out Satan?
He points out the complete absurdity of their claim. If a kingdom is divided against itself, it falls. If a house is divided, it collapses.
It's basic strategy.
Exactly. If Satan is actively empowering Jesus to destroy his own demonic forces, then Satan has initiated a civil war against himself, and his empire is already finished.
Right. A king doesn't fund a rebellion against his own throne. It makes zero logical sense.
Right.
And to really drive the point home, Jesus uses the analogy of a strong man.
He says that no one can break into a strong man's house and steal his property unless they first tie up the strong man. In this metaphor, Satan is the strong man, and the vulnerable people he possesses are his property.
So Jesus is essentially saying, I'm not working with the strong man. I am the one breaking the door down, tying him up, and rescuing the captives.
Yes.
He is proving that he is overpowering the demonic realm from the outside, not collaborating with it from the inside.
But immediately following this logical takedown, Jesus delivers a warning that has caused, honestly, immense anxiety for 2,000 years.
Oh, the unforgivable sin.
Yes. He introduces the concept of the unforgivable sin, or blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. He states that whoever commits this sin never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin.
Now wait, when I hear the phrase unforgivable sin, my mind immediately goes to like a moment of weakness, maybe yelling something terrible at God in a fit of grief or experiencing severe religious doubt. It sounds terrifying for a normal listener.
It really does.
But reading between the lines of the study notes we have, this feels less like a momentary lapse and more like a permanent, almost neurological rewiring of how these scribes perceive reality.
That is a very, very accurate way to frame it. The study notes provide crucial clarity here to prevent unnecessary panic. This is not an accidental slip of the tongue. It's not a struggle with doubt. The scribes were staring directly at the undeniable, compassionate, liberating work of the Holy Spirit, and they made a persistent, deliberate choice to label it as absolute evil.
Oh, wow. So it's like a settled state of the heart. They have inverted their moral compass so completely that they look at the literal source of salvation and call it Satan.
Exactly.
So a person in that state will never ask for forgiveness because they no longer even recognize their need for it.
Right. The fact that a listener might worry they have committed the sin is actually the greatest proof that they haven't. A hardened heart just doesn't care. The scribes weren't worried. They were entirely resolute in their rejection.
That is a huge relief to clarify.
Mm.
And right at the climax of this intense theological standoff, word reaches the house that his biological family has finally arrived.
Right.
His mother and brothers are standing outside the suffocating crowd, sending a message in and calling for him.
And this is where Jesus does something culturally revolutionary. He looks at the people seated in a circle around him, his newly drafted, very flawed disciples, and says, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother."
To a modern ear, that might sound a bit, I don't know, dismissive.
Yeah.
But in a first-century Middle Eastern context, it is earth-shattering.
Oh, completely.
Because in an honor and shame culture, your biological bloodline was your entire identity. It was your social security, your economic safety net, your reputation. To separate from your family was basically social suicide.
It was everything. And Jesus completely redefines the paradigm here. He isn't necessarily disrespecting his biological family, but he's fundamentally elevating his spiritual family. He shifts the ultimate boundary of community from biological bloodlines and geographical proximity to spiritual obedience. Doing the will of God becomes the only requirement for belonging to this new family.
It perfectly ties together the entire chaos of the chapter, really. I mean, we started with a rigid legal trap in a synagogue that sparked a bipartisan death threat.
Yeah.
We watched Jesus navigate the logistical nightmare of massive crowds and silence the demonic forces trying to hijack his narrative. We saw him draft a cabinet of political enemies to help shoulder the load.
It's been quite the journey.
And finally, amidst accusations of madness from his relatives and demonic collusion from the elites, he just redraws the boundaries of human connection entirely.
It is a chapter entirely about drawing lines in the sand. The religious leaders make their choice. The crowds make their choice. The 12 apostles make their choice. The middle ground simply ceases to exist in Mark chapter 3.
Which I think leaves us with a final provocative thought to ponder. You know, we live in a world that is more digitally connected than any generation in human history, yet study after study reveals we are more isolated and lonely than ever before.
It's a real paradox.
It is. So if biological proximity or shared geography isn't enough to sustain us anymore, what does it truly mean for you to build your family based on a shared higher purpose? How does stepping into a community of active obedience change the way you define who you actually belong to?
It is the exact challenge Jesus was placing before the crowds back then, and it remains just as relevant today.
It really does.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. We love exploring these texts, unpacking the history, and finding the profound depth beneath the surface. As we wrap up this conversation, we want to say goodbye the exact same way we started. God blesses all the listeners. Take care, and we'll see you next time.